Hi there. In our last clip we talked about the blues and introduced a new scale, the blues scale. I want to talk about just a couple of other scalic patterns this time. Now I do admit that we're starting to get away from our palette of using only C major this time, but I'm trying to still keep it in very simple territory and not frighten people that are coming to improvising and playing the piano for the first time. And we're going to talk about two very different artists, Claude Debussy, an impressionist around at the end of the 19th century, and Stevie Wonder, who are a great soul disco artist, Motown, from 60s, 70s, 80s, current up to this time. Now these two scales, if we look at our scale of C, it's just a collection of intervals that can be defined like this. Tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. That makes our scale of C, and if you repeat those gaps between the notes of tone and semitone in that order, starting on any note on the piano, you'll have exactly the same scale in a different key. That's how these things work. Now this Debussy and Ravel and all those kind of late 19th century, early 20th century impressionist artists made great use of a very different scale, which instead of having tones and semitone variations, just use only tones. And for any of those of you around my age or from a generation of where play school used to be children's entertainment, you may remember this sound. Very sort of ethereal, strange sounding through the arched window, for anybody that remembers that. This is called a whole tone scale. It's just using tones. Every gap is a tone. So instead of 8 notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, our conventional scale, we've got this 7-note scale because we've taken out the semitones and converged it all into tones. And it's kind of, there's a sort of interesting parallel in art, in as much as for all the different styles in Western art, since the beginning of it really, you could describe most of them as figurative in various different ways. They were trying to describe things that they saw, and you would look at a painting and you may or may not like it according to your subjective taste, but you can kind of see largely what the scene was, the humans, the animals, the sky, the sea, whatever it may be. And it's only at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th, that kind of started to fray around the edges, and with people like Turner and Manet and Monet, they would blur these colours. The images became more indistinct. It was more evoking a mood of what they were seeing than the actual figurative representation. Why am I launching into this kind of rather bogus art history? Because interestingly, almost exactly the same thing was happening in music. For all the various different styles, from plain song onwards to, through Baroque, classical, romantic, very different languages, but they'd all basically existed around a set of harmonies that kind of were adapted and pulled and stretched, but essentially the same kind of set of harmonies. As we've shown, leaping from different styles, they're all based around similar kind of ideas. And for the first time, that kind of basic scale setup was changing, and this gave rise to music that wasn't really in any specific key, because you've just got all these tones and they all harmonize with each other, and there's no sort of clashes or anything, because whatever you play in the whole tone scale, wherever you play it, there will be no clashes. We have no wrong notes that stick out, so you'll get sort of Debussy moods like this. You can't really say what key that's in, but it does evoke that kind of music. So that's the whole tone scale. Next, we're going to have a scale which everybody can play, whether they've ever touched a piano before or not. It's called the Pentatonic Scale, which sounds very complicated. It simply means 5 tones. And I say everybody can play it for this very simple reason. If you put your fingers on any black note at the top of the piano and just run down the notes, that is the pentatonic scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, if you talk about writing things using just those notes, you may think, well, you're using less than half of the notes available to you on a piano, so is that not going to limit creativity? Well, the interesting thing is that if you talk to anybody about Stevie Wonder, the artist, one of the things that a lot of musicians will say is that he writes fantastic horn lines and horn riffs and kind of introductory sort of little rhythms and things that, everybody says, yeah, Stevie's horn lines are fantastic. And almost without exception, all of them can be played just on the black notes. And you don't even realize it when you're listening to them. You're just thinking, what a great line. But it's a kind of almost a perfect musical evocation of less is more, that you're playing with less than half of the notes available. You still come up with these great lines like fantastic horn line, but played using just those 5 tones. So 2 different scales, the whole tone scale of 7 notes, the pentatonic scale of just 5 notes. No diminishment of creativity, and interesting tools to play around with if you're stuck for trying to come up with a line or a melody.